Hello everyone, my name is Stewart, and this is my presentation on research that I've done with my colleague, Cassandra Shukla. We both work at Zayed University. We're both located on the Abu Dhabi campus, although there are two campuses, Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And this is our research, aligning expectations, exploring librarian and teaching faculty perceptions of information literacy sessions. So just a quick outline of what's to come. What we'll do is describe our context that we're working in. We'll introduce the course Gen 120 Life Skills, where Casey has served as the course coordinator and I have served as the information literacy coordinator. Observations that led us to conduct this research, the purpose of this research, and then how we went about this research, what we discovered, how our findings assisted us in making adjustments in what we did, what we learned after all of that, and how we've learned how to measure our success in the coordination of these library and information literacy sessions. So a little bit about our context. Zayed University has campuses in both Abu Dhabi and Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. The university was founded in 1998, and it was the first institute of higher education to provide education for women within the United Arab Emirates. The university has been coeducational since 2008, but it is still segregated by gender, meaning that there are male days and female days in the library. This fall semester, we've had a slight change with that, where we have a new program. It's our College of Interdisciplinary Studies, and it is an online program through Minerva, and those students are able to visit the library and navigate the campus regardless of what their gender is and the gender assigned day. And our university is accredited through Middle States Commission on Higher Education. We have over 11,000 students. There's a 13-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio, in part just due to our multilingual students. And our student body is 98% Emirati. So our students are primarily, local students from the UAE, whereas our faculty members are incredibly diverse, coming from 60 different countries around the world. So an introduction of Gen 120 Life Skills. So this is a course that I inherited from the information literacy coordinator that came before me. It has been a class where there has been dedicated information literacy instruction for many years. When I started, I met Casey shortly thereafter, as she was one of the instructors that I worked with to coordinate her sessions. Each semester, there were 20 to 40 different sections of this course per campus. It's a required course in the general education department. It was discontinued very recently, though. And in my role as the information literacy coordinator, I worked on, creating pairings between teaching faculty and librarians for the scheduling of information literacy sessions. I also created, the learning outcomes for those sessions, and shared instruction materials with other librarians, and kind of helped guide their instruction within the course. And essentially, the information literacy session is really, it's based on introducing first-year students to the library and exposing them to different resources where they'll be able to find high-quality information for their semester project, which requires they do some community service. And so we guide them through finding sources that will help them educate themselves on the organization they're volunteering for, as well as the topics that they need to be familiar with in order to be successful volunteers. So when Casey and I started collaborating on the information literacy session together, it was with Casey as an instructor and I as both the coordinator and librarian. Maybe a year or so after this, Casey became the course coordinator. And this is when we took the opportunity to really, reflect on this experiences. Casey and I had had really positive information literacy experiences together as, a team. But we knew that not all librarians and teaching faculty had that same experience with the library session. So we found in our respective roles that we were constantly negotiating feedback from librarians and teaching faculty, and their feedback indicated that experiences varied greatly between these two groups. So we wanted to better understand what was going on, and in some cases what was going wrong, because some experiences seemed very positive, but others not so much. So we wanted to understand where things were going awry. This is what brings us to the purpose of this actual research project. We wanted to know what was happening in classrooms, what each side, meaning library information literacy instructors versus the teaching faculty for the course, what they believed should be happening in these classes, and then clarifying expectations and learning objectives for this information literacy session, because from our observations, there were clearly expectations that were not aligned between the library and teaching faculty. This research was conducted with librarians and teaching faculty that were involved with Gen 120 during the semesters when we surveyed, which was spring 2019 and spring 2020 on both campuses. We obtained ethical approval from the Research Standing Committee, and both of us had completed the mandatory research training. We recruited our participants via email, just requesting that they complete our survey and give us feedback on how the library sessions went. We collected data using Qualtrics survey software, and our survey data consisted of Likert scales, multiple choice questions, as well as open-ended questions. When participants conducted the survey, the first thing they were asked was whether they were a member of the teaching faculty for Gen 120 or a librarian that was teaching the IL session. Then, based on how participants identified themselves, they were asked separate lists of questions. Many of them were duplicates, but addressed different facets of the question. So all participants were asked about their demographics, how they prepared for visits, how they communicated with each other, quantitative reports of their experiences with the session, qualitative experiences with the session, and then a reflection at the end. What we learned was that the information literacy session did meet expectations in terms of quality. However, we also learned that these sessions needed to be more interactive and engaging. Although we have a list of learning objectives that all librarians cover, librarians can accomplish that in a multitude of ways. And what we learned was that sometimes these sessions were not as interactive or engaging as they needed to be. When we prodded more to kind of understand more about the experiences, we learned that group assistance was needed within classes. More activities and handouts would be useful, a higher level of engagement, and in general, just more time. Librarians were perceived as being well organized and prepared for the sessions, informative, energetic, engaging. They covered learning outcomes. They helped students locate articles, understood the needs of students, and made themselves freely available to students. It was also the general consensus from the open-ended questions that the session exceeded expectations, but student engagement wasn't very high in the session. When we asked faculty how we could improve these information literacy sessions, There wasn't really a lot of feedback. Faculty didn't have to type anything into the box. It wasn't like a mandatory question, where they had to submit it in order to, submit the full survey. But they all wrote something, whether that be NA, not applicable, no, none. Otherwise, those that did add feedback indicated that the session was well done, that they just needed more time. When we looked at findings from librarians, we noticed something kind of interesting. They echoed the sentiment that sessions were equal to their expectations in terms of quality of the session. They also noticed that student engagement was lower than they expected. When asked about whether these sessions met their expectations, in an area where they were allowed to type freely, librarians indicated that the IELTS sessions met their expectations, but that their expectations hadn't been very high for the sessions in the first place. Librarians indicated that the reasons why were regarding the students. Earbuds were mentioned multiple times, students unsure of topic or the actual assignment. There was also a note that the quality of student varied greatly from section to section, and that students seemed unprepared, but this was not something they necessarily attributed to the teaching faculty. Now, at first glance, at least the feedback from faculty members is very positive. From the faculty response, they indicated that the content and quality of sessions was high, it just needed to be more engaging and interactive. If anything, the only recommendations that were coming from faculty were that we needed more time in these sessions. Librarians' responses were not quite as positive as faculty, but they didn't attribute any of the issues they were encountering in classrooms with actual teaching faculty. This is when our response rate of participants became important. There were 18 respondents when we conducted this research in spring 2019. 8 of them were faculty members, and 10 of them were librarians. However, there were 16 faculty members that taught Gen 120 that semester, and there were 10 librarians that taught the IL sessions for Gen 120 that semester. Only 50% of the teaching faculty had completed the survey. This explained why our findings from faculty members did not reflect the observations that we had going into this research. Based on the first round of survey responses, we decided there were some things we needed to change. I wanted Gen 120 teaching faculty to feel more involved and engaged with the information literacy session. Casey encouraged me to communicate directly with Gen 120 faculty, and so I began doing this through my presence at monthly meetings, via email, and through documents such as simplified lists of learning objectives for the IL session and handouts. With librarians, I shared feedback from the spring 2019 survey and emphasized the importance of the IL session and presented an overview to teaching faculty of the session and how it tied not just into the semester-long project, but the full course, as well as students' future experiences. And then everything was perfect, and Gen 120's IL sessions lived happily ever after. Wait a minute, that's not what happened. We did a lot of work. We reviewed learning objectives for the IL session, solicited feedback from librarians and teaching faculty, communicated final changes to librarians and teaching faculty, and then we began developing new IL materials that could supplement additional course content and provided information literacy training directly for teaching faculty so that they understood the content and its value better. We relaunched the survey for the spring 2020 semester. About 6 or 7 weeks into this new semester, a new year, was when the UAE entered lockdown for COVID-19. IL sessions were scheduled for that same week. when students returned from spring break. Librarians responded quickly and taught information literacy sessions online. In some cases, these sessions were canceled due to the chaos of adapting to emergency online instruction. This interrupted our second round of data collection, and thus response rates were reduced for both teaching faculty and librarians from the spring 2019 semester when we originally collected data. That said, it wasn't all bad. The library has since maintained a strong connection with teaching faculty from Gen 120. Some of the teaching faculty are now course coordinators for other courses and have thus initiated information literacy sessions for these new courses. We also learned a lot of lessons that I know we'll both be using in the future. Communication is a huge one. Not just communicating with our own groups. In the past, Casey communicated with her cohort of teaching faculty, and I communicated with my librarians through our Information Literacy Council. What we learned throughout all of this is that our efforts in the library are far, far more successful and are received much better when we are actively a part of our liaison departments. As a result of all of this, we did training for teaching faculty. So Gen 120 instructors, they underwent some information literacy sessions. I found just through doing the survey, it's been a good reflective practice. I don't know if the librarians or faculty members took something away from that experience because it's not something that we asked at that time. But it was quite rewarding to read their feedback. In particular, even though we didn't have a high response rate in spring 2020, I would say the feedback was positive but also constructive. It wasn't necessarily negative when we did our first round of data collection in spring 2019, but it didn't really give us that much information. What we heard was, yeah, it's useful. We need more time, or they need more time. Whereas the second round, I felt like the critiques were more constructive and more useful, and also demonstrated that teaching faculty in particular had a better understanding of why the library was there to teach information literacy. And I think that was a huge win as well. Thank you so much. If any of you have questions or comments or want to discuss this further, or have even just had similar experiences, we'd love to hear from you. We are both still at Zayed University in Abu Dhabi. Thank you so much for attending our presentation, and have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference.